Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. Today I'm trying to create some special atmosphere, and the special atmosphere is in honor of Joe Friendly, because Joe Friendly doesn't like things that are conventional. And it's exciting that you can explore video as an art form, and video as an art form on public access television means that you can put it out there and not be concerned about the commercial interest saying, ooh, you know, this isn't making people buy stuff. So what I'm hoping to do today is to go into a deep level of thought. And the deep level of thought has to do with my interest and my revealing of certain video footage that I've had for many years, just waiting for the right time so that it can be seen as constructive. Some of my colleagues have accused me of like guru baiting, that when I'm calling to people's attention the sexual blessings or abuse with big gurus, that there's nothing constructive about it, or that it's almost like they don't really believe that a guru can offer that much anyway, so just leave them alone because they're just like the rest of us. However, I don't believe that's the case. This is a picture of Shirdi Baba. He died in 1918, and I think what made me really, really connect with him was when I read a book and all of a sudden I just got it. I understood what it was like to be a downtrodden Indian at the time of the British Raj. And I could see how important these extraordinary souls were, who were able to rise above mediocrity, social mediocrity. And as a result of their accomplishment of a very high perspective, they could bestow a blessing and a protection on those around them. So right now, what I want to do is, and then also I want to say that part of my concern about real gurus is that if you are involved with someone and there's compensations, like you don't feel complete freedom, but you stay for whatever the reasons are, it's like it takes away not only whatever enlightenment might be, because they're not qualified to take you there. And certainly you do need teachers, because certainly there is a great work involved. But it takes, even if you can't comprehend what enlightenment is, it takes away the art of life. And I want to read now something that I picked up at Union Square. There was a girl who was selling her story, she said. And I said, what's your story about? And I think she said it was about sexual obsession. And I was kind of intrigued with her forwardness, and it didn't cost very much. I think it was $2. Otherwise, I don't think I would have bought it. And I mean, I remember giving her 20, and I remember her giving me a lot of $1 bills back. And it sat around in my place, and I finally read it just about an hour ago. And I was so impressed that I thought, this is just what I've been looking for, to introduce my series on pedophilia. Because we have to start getting and unfolding the sexual energies. So this young lady, I'm very impressed. You can get in touch with her. Her email is tick-tick-tick-tick-boom@gmail.com. So that's 4 ticks and 1 boom, and then gmail.com. And see if you're not as impressed as I am with what she's done. So let me start. In a video game dream the night before last, Ariel played a thin, translucent octopus that hovered an inch above the ground, traveling through a candle-lit world where shadows lurked weightily and watched her, menacing as she passed before crumbling upwards and flying away as flocks of black butterflies. Everything else, even the trees, was made of stone. Sean, the only other living thing in sight, took the form of a massive snake, coiling and uncoiling as he waited for her arrival in a foyer of whitish, decaying granite. She was terrified, but she watched her octopus body glide toward the building and stand next to him. The snake, staring at her sternly with glassy eyes, moved his head closer, but instead of eating her, simply exhaled, warming the air around her. He breathed on her again and again, softly, as though trying to cultivate a small fire. Shakily at first, but gaining strength, the octopus began, eerily, to sing. Eerily to sing. And this, you'll see later on, the singing. The metaphor was obvious, if lovely, and Ariel felt mocked somehow, as though the dream's purpose was not to verify Sean's kindness, but to cast her fears themselves as cartoonish, laughable. In real life, of course, Sean wasn't so scary. As a person, he was effusive but slender, with an impatient energy that seemed to keep him always on the verge of bursting. He had big green eyes, lucid as pure marbles, that glowed so bright when he talked fast, she feared they'd burn 2 black holes in his skull. He taught her how to pet bumblebees and made elaborate jewelry for her with scrap paper and a pocket knife instead of taking notes in class. He was knowable. He said things like, "You smell like bubblegum," and hid ink drawings and notes in her pockets for her to find later. She wasn't scared anymore, but they hadn't even kissed yet because their interaction somehow took on the quality of something horribly staged. She felt every time something almost happened. Like last week at his place, she pinned him down wrestling, straddling him on his chest as he grabbed her calves with both hands, and he grinned up at her. Right then, right before she thought of it, she could have quite easily kissed him, but just as suddenly she felt like a lewd version of one of those wind-up dolls from the 80s, which you pull the strings of to make it recite, in squeaky, sped-up tones, one of 3 possible phrases. "Oh my God, that feels so good," was most likely in the sessions to ring out. Her regular, a few months earlier, CV, though he later admitted after he had fallen in love with her and tried to lick her asshole that his real name was Viddish, had bright black eyes, and paid her $300 to sit on his chest, naked, and sing the doll songs at irregular interviews. She let him touch her tits because he had an irritating British accent, and she wanted to shut him up. In her head, she imagined different combinations of C and V words that might make up the long form of the abbreviation. At home, she kept a list of them. So far, it read, cardiovascular, crisis vernacular, cream of vegetable, canned vitriol, candied violins, cherry video, conspiracy vacuum, chaos virgin, clock violence. The final term actually recalled CV's apartment because she collected clocks and displayed them, dozens of them, around his apartment, scattered among the cardboard boxes where he kept the rest of his possessions. Their abundance made them useless because, all set slightly off, they reached each quarter hour at markedly different times, thus chiming incessantly and making it impossible to tell how much time had actually passed. CV was so accustomed to them, he blocked them out completely, but Ariel found it entertaining not to filter out the different layers of sound, but to savor the disruption. Your wet cunt birds chirping feels so good on my ding-dong, ding-dong. She found his compulsion pointless and somewhat inexplicable, like most collections, but having only 3 phrases to choose from, she didn't bother letting him know her opinion. The first time she'd met him, he strode to the door and introduced himself, then ran his hand back and forth once over the upper stretch of her back. His hands were large and wiry and tense, as though he had been training himself to hold her down. "Come," he said, "now, my queen. Will it be you who gets the massage, or you who administers it?" Maybe this will be more interesting if I move it close. Trying to conceal her reluctance, she glanced out the window, which stretched across the entire north wall of the living room. It was sunny and raining at the same time, and shafts of pale light drove through the shifting, lacy patterns of clouds and mist. Somehow she emitted a loud sneeze, as though reflexively ejecting the air he had just exhaled. It echoed in the empty room like the sound of marbles dropped in a steel drum. Ariel climbed off of Sean, kneeling beside him on the bed with her knees pointing towards him. She cocked her head to look at him, wondering what he saw on her face. He knew very little, and she hoped to keep it that way, because she didn't need to talk about it anymore. The work was one thing, but unlike the other incidents she chose to do. The work was one thing, because unlike the other incidents she chose to do it. She gave hand jobs mostly, but she teased the men. She made them beg for it. When they got desperate, if you played your cards right, you could pull a good $500 for a stupid hand job. She didn't have sex with any of them, though, because of everything that had happened long before she got involved in any of this. It hurt to shove even a tampon up there. Now the actual fact of Ryan, for example, scraping at her insides over and over until they bled, had already happened, had already finished happening. But you couldn't shed a body like you could shed ideas of yourself, dead skins to shrug off like a bad winter. In a sense, that bodily past, even in its completion, locked the present into place, confirmed its inevitability. Not because through sex work she sought to reenact those impositions, and the ones that followed, to change their meaning through the performance of her power, or to conquer them through the power of her performance. Nor was it because most men, being men, took her very existence as an invitation, encoded their demands in the image of her beauty and projected them, with eyes and words and now bills, in the familiar, almost comfortable language of obligation, onto its likeness, herself. Surely, yes, sex work meant more men and more impositions, though when so many lined up in a row, they became tiny somehow, identical, unthreatening, half conquered perhaps, or half blurred. But in the end, above all, her history placed her here by inculcating the sense that her body, the things she did with it, none of it could be sacred anymore. She couldn't fuck them, but she would have. It didn't actually matter who she had sex with at this point. Again, if this impresses you as much as it impresses me, you can reach the author at tick-tick-tick-tick-boom@gmail.com. That's 4 ticks and 1 boom. Did it? Ariel broke eye contact with Sean, turning her head away towards his dresser. Bare, but for a little plastic fish tank. In it he had planted a bunch of azaleas somebody had left for dead and discarded, nursing them back to life in the sunniest corner of the room. God, it was dangerous to look at anything, to think about anything. She remembered now the first thing Andy and Elena did when she walked in the door, which was to pour champagne into 3 fragile glasses and toast to the tiny pet frogs fucking in their fish tank. The sickly creatures hovered just above the artificial turquoise plant in the tank, and its fluorescence seemed to drain them, to render them anachronistic, and cast angular blue reflections on the kitchen counter. Look at them go at it. Every day we come home to this. There's one mama frog, that big one there. We call her the slut. She's fucking her kids left and right. She's spawning new ones by the dozen. We started off with 5 of them, and now we have 17. Andy, a beast of a man with a tiny nub of a penis, collapsed into a fit of guttural laughter. Elena, his wife, giggled and trotted over to turn up the stereo. The couple had hired Ariel. It was clear because she was authentically young, and they wanted an excuse to act that way. They threw back the champagne like shots and refilled Ariel's glass to the brim, even though she hadn't finished what they had poured her in the first place. She could tell they were the sort of clients who ingested more and more substances until they felt comfortable with asking for what it was that they wanted. Just like the most despicable middle-aged men who called on her, they wanted to pay her to create the impression she was enjoying herself. So she obliged and laughed at the jokes they recounted and drank what they poured her and snorted obediently the lines that they offered her. And then she let Andy rub up against her as Elena watched and pretended to enjoy herself too, her horrified disbelief framed by the little O of her mouth. Ariel was the only one getting paid for her time, but it seemed as though Elena felt she was paying for something, for his part. Andy never noticed the look on his wife's face as he rocked the table next to the couch quivered, and the half-dried plants set on the glass sent dead flower petals fluttering to the ground. When Ariel left, they crushed beneath her shoes and left trails behind her out the door and to the elevator. Brian had a fish tank too, with sea snails and rickety-looking crabs and multicolored plants, real ones, that shrank away from your hand when you tried to touch them. The inside of his apartment was spotless, almost corporate, but the door frame, when he let her in, was strung with spider webs, as though no one had left or entered in years. For the rest of the evening, she picked up the silvery strands off her sweater, politely assuring her host they were nothing but lint. Brian's session was mutual masturbation, which was easier and more profitable than hand jobs. "Oh yeah, stroke your cock for me." Sometimes her voice still surprised her when she heard it. Those wind-up dolls had always made her shudder as a child, because sometimes her little brother would start to mimic them when her mother left the room. But it was easy. You just echoed the phrases when they pulled the string, and when they were almost done, threw in the word cunt, and it was over. But the things in her head weren't stored neatly like recordings in a mechanism, and it was never over with thoughts that had long since ceased to echo, ringing back in jarring tones, loud as ever, the sound of CV saying, "In India, when a sun shower comes, we say it is the devil beating his wife. Now you will take off your clothes and lie face down on the bed." Chime. And Andy grunting and rubbing his cock on her flat chest, and Brian breathing a horrible wine stench into her face, and he is old and touches her face with a small fat hand as if he is in love with her, layers of sound amplifying and distorting one another, building to a stench and reverberating off the stone walls of the foyer. And there they were. Sean asked what was wrong and touched her hair, but it was far too late to kiss him now. "I have too many memories," she replied. He let out a little breathy laugh, and she smiled back sincerely, because that was the correct thing for him to do. And then he said something about wanting to repair her desire, something beautiful, like a superstition she would like to believe, and was too old to believe. And in the end he could do no such thing, but she dared him to open her anyway. And what would come out? Well, the physical scrapings first, several layers of skin from inside, and any blood shed unnaturally over the years, and the nerve endings that processed only pain, now sucked from where they were lodged, and perhaps some shadows of clients, those darker moments, but they would come easily, and next with slightly more strain, the memories of Carlos and Alan's grubby hands clasped over her mouth, and the bed Juan pinned her onto, all linked together like paper dolls pulled along from between her legs, and from the hundreds of pills, two at a time, taken to soothe the pain. so that she could walk normally and slower. Now letter by letter, Ryan asking, could they fuck again, or was she still bleeding? And finally pushed out like a stillborn baby with Sean's hands guiding the head, the memory of the very first time at the age of 15. Her trust was betrayed before it was earned, and from behind this birth emerges something clean. If he waits patiently, expanding, finally relieved like an accordion, something like joy. So, there you go. That's art. I found this in Union Square. She was sitting by the entrance to the subway, and I think it's amazing. So, any of you who want to see me, I'm in Union Square on Wednesdays, mostly to do this, to promote this book, 9/11 Truth, Synthetic Terror Made in USA, by Webster Tarpley. But I must say, I'm very, very touched by the art that's available in this world, and I want to start doing a series on the power of art and the importance of joy. So, I want to see now if I can kind of wrap up what I was hoping to do, which was it's to consider what new realities are, without that being something where you're burying your head in the sand about what the reality is that you have right now. That a new reality is something where you are in denial about how the world really is. And when I was at the ashram, where I went to learn how to advance my charity more effectively, because Vincenzo and I were trying to build an eco-village in Cyprus, renewable energies and processing sewage with living machines, things that go from one tank to another tank to another tank. Just nature, just plants can take the worst waste, and what's waste for one system becomes food for another. And there was lots of evidence that there's non-chemical ways of achieving things, and I was young and enthusiastic to use the money that I earned with my cellular earnings to become seeds for what they used to call better or best practice. So the charity could kind of test these things, and then they could go forth. So eventually, I came upon this pedophilia thing, the sex slaves in the White House, Kathy O'Brien, and I figured, well, this is as good as anything to put your attention on. But it really stumped me, because I couldn't understand how people were turned on by children. And, I was in my late 40s before I was even aware that child abuse meant sexual abuse. I thought child abuse meant, some guy got drunk and he was kind of in a bad mood and cranky because, he was poor and he couldn't find work, and so he sort of knocked his kids around. But obviously it's more than that. So in order to really understand the problem, you've got to have compassion for both sides. And what I liked about this author, who's had experience as a sex worker, was through her art and her ability to relay a moment of this amazing gift that we call life. She could show compassion for both sides. And then at the end, when she was describing these paper dolls coming out between her legs, it really illustrated to me something that you sort of accept when you're in an ashram, that the master has the ability to erase your karma or to mitigate a lot of it so that he can give his spiritual power so you can carry on with the great work. And it was this young lady, this author, who's apparently a sex worker. I didn't realize until I read it just a few hours ago. She was able to show what it would be like. I mean, what that mechanism's like. She's talking about this younger guy and how nice he is. But imagine a great master, a powerful master, and that's a picture of Shirdi Baba, who died in 1918, as I said before. Underneath is a swastika, and that's something I'm always emphasizing, that if you think you're not conditioned and you have a reaction to the swastika, you're conditioned. And my excitement is to see if we can go beyond conditioning. And I think when you run across great art, it sort of lifts you up beyond your stereotypical frameworks of grasping reality, and it gives you a new perspective. And those new perspectives, I feel, are so valuable. And that's why art is so important. So I'm going to be starting a series called The Power of Art and Why We Need Artists. And it could be as overt as an artist doing a drawing of, oh, why is it going sort of dark? Here, I'll go on this one. It could be as overt as an artist doing a drawing of a big industrialist with Adolf Hitler as a puppet that could illustrate certain things. Or it could be more subtle, which is what I feel, we were just listening to here with this lady talking about her life as a sex worker. But in any case, I think there's a lot of denial in this society. People at the ashram thought, what a horrific thing that I was interested in, pedophilia. People were saying you scare away all the angels, when you come around and talk about those things. Oh, looks like I got my light back. And when I came back here and did some public access, I ran into Frank Craven, and I was sort of commiserating with him and saying what had happened to me, because he was the one that I did a show with in August of 2000. And he said, isn't that exactly where the angels go first when people are suffering? And I thought, what a beautiful soul. He's not the type that's inclined to do a lot of spiritual practice or go to an ashram, but he gave me a great teaching right when he told me that. So I am really wanting to put forth this material for the sake of great positivity, for the sake of greater spiritual connection with divinity, which I absolutely know is there. And I know there are such things as real masters, Sat Gurus, and it takes extraordinary fortune to be able to encounter a Sat Guru. But of course, Sat Gurus being what they are, and the mystery of creation being what it is, if you have a sincere desire, when they say when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So I think that's something important to hearten us. Thank you for joining me. I'm Paula Gloria, and we've had an excursion farther down the rabbit hole.